Okay, so Foresight Arap, I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. First of all, about Arap. We're a global engineering design company. As I said, we do infrastructure, buildings and consulting. This is one of our projects in Singapore, a beautiful building that we designed, and these are the type of things that we as a company tend to do. They're challenging projects, they're iconic projects, and they're all over the world. Another one that we did closer to home was in London. We did the landscape design for the Olympic Park. So it goes all the way from buildings to how cities and the public realm is designed, and we also did the structural engineering for the orbit, which was another iconic structure in London. And a really exciting, personally I think, project that we're currently working on as a firm is the Garden Bridge here in London. That's a collaboration between us and Heatherwick Studios, the architects, and it'll hopefully be a wonderful way to cross the city, the river in the future. It's a pedestrian bridge that's essentially a park that crosses the river. So we'll have fully grown trees that grow and emerge over time, and it'll be a new addition to both the London skyline, if you like, and also for a new form of transport, walkable across the city, and that will come live in the coming years. We're a global team within Foresight. We have these locations where we're present in Melbourne, Hong Kong. We've just added someone in Berlin. In London is where the core of the team sits, and we have New York and San Francisco where our global director sits. So we try to be global in everything that we do, and we try to influence also the regions and offices that Arap is active in, which are all of these dark countries here is where we have a presence, so that we can make sure that we deliver foresight for our company equally across all of the world, not just in the centers that we're active in. What we try to do all the time when we do foresight is combine the kind of classic techniques of horizon scanning, trend research, scenario planning with the actual engineering expertise that we have in the business. So this is really the key point where we try to be different and where we try to do things in a way that makes it relevant to our company. So working with our businesses to figure out, for example, how does our aviation business look like in the future? How does our rail business look like in the future? How does our city business look like in the future? Because that's the way that we can make foresight relevant to our firm and provide some meaningful input into our strategy and business development and so forth. We do three main things in the company. We're an internal think tank, so we work for Arap. We do a lot of collaborations with businesses, like I said, so collaborations working with Arap, and we do a tiny bit of external consulting, but this is really just for fun. We haven't got hard revenue targets. It's more for us to connect with other organizations outside and also to make sure that new knowledge, new ideas, and new techniques flow into our team. Quickly, a couple of cities relevant projects that we've done in the past and that we're currently working on. This was an exploration into a future urban high-rise, which we did about 3 years ago. It's called It's Alive, and we kind of tried to translate what impact megatrends could have on the design and structure and function of buildings in the future. So we have things like bioreactor facade elements that produce biofuel. We have modular building components that can be changed through robotic construction. We have water capture. We have data communication. We have integrated transport hubs. So all of the things that we're talking about at the moment in terms of trends, we just try to capture and communicate in one image. And it was really powerful. This will never be built like that, and I got into big trouble with our structural engineers who said it wouldn't stand up. But despite that, it was a very, very good tool to talk, for example, with our facades team about what function and design facades might have in the future. Something that we did a little bit more recently was about the future of rail. So again, we try to use these illustrations to imagine what the future of rail travel might look like, what the key technologies are, what the passenger experience might be like. And again, we use that with some of our biggest clients like Network Rail to try to understand how the projects that we're doing with them now should think about the future and should integrate the future into the design and strategy decisions that they're making today. And this is a project called Cities Alive. This is about rethinking green infrastructure. And I've put this up there because we just won an award for this one yesterday, a Management Consulting Association award. And for us, it was really surprising that we won this award because it was about green infrastructure, which is often neglected in at least parts of the design world. And we had to go up against companies like KPMG and so forth. And I thought, we're never going to win with green infrastructure in an environment like that. And for us, it was actually a beautiful reflection that these things are becoming more important, both in the city dialogue and in the consulting work. So this is all about green infrastructure. And as a report, I think there should be a few copies of the summary there that you guys can take away. This should have been hidden, never mind. This is a project, finally, just to again give you a bit of context of what we do for a global vehicle manufacturer. And they, like many automotive companies, are aware of the trends in cities. So less cars, greater focus on walking and cycling, greater focus on public transport. And they're trying to reimagine what that means for how their services might be delivered in the future. So this car company is actually thinking about designing a building that can provide a range of different mobility and related services in an urban context. And they then look to us because they know everything about cars, but we know everything about cities. And together we can then try to imagine how mobility might change and how mobility might be delivered in the future in an urban context. Now, all of this relates to one of our and probably your key philosophies, and that is that change is constant. We have to recognize that change is happening all around it at a constant rate. So we have to figure out how we as a company and our clients deal with that change, because if we don't understand change and recognize change, then we are going to be the next blockbuster of our industry and we're going to be overtaken by Netflix. And we as a company, as Arap, are also not immune to that, so we have to try to constantly understand how we can counteract that. Pudong, Shanghai's Pudong district in the 1990s. This is what it looked like about 25 years ago now, and this is what it looks like today, the same place. If you think about the people that lived in this place in the 90s, you know, this would have been absolute science fiction. And it just shows to me how rapidly some parts of our world are changing, and in particular cities. You know, the change that we're seeing in cities, in particular in Asia, is absolutely fundamental and absolutely rapid. And we have to try to understand how we can ensure that that change is the right change, because it impacts the lives of millions of people and impacts how we live, work, and play. The papal inauguration, you probably all have seen this image before. It's kind of like a classic change image. Papal inauguration 2005. One tiny mobile phone here in the bottom, you know, not impacted by the digital revolution yet at all, the event. And the same thing in 2013, complete transformation of how we as society consume things, share things, communicate about stuff, meet people, play with people, all of these different things. So we have to recognize that these changes are happening, and we have to translate what it means for us. And that's in the second part, change is constant, but context is variable. So that leads us to the question of, what does our future look like? And in this case, the future of cities. And the way that we, in our team, explore the future is often by looking at case studies and by trying to look at what is happening in other parts of the world and what can these emerging insights tell us about how our industry, how our sector might change and evolve in the future. And there's some really, really nice, interesting examples about how cities are changing that I'm just going to go through right now. A lot of this idea of smart cities is really not about a huge utopian vision of a city that tracks everything and collects data about everything and is completely autonomous. It's about smart upgrades to existing cities. And this is a parking system here in New York where they've just put these sensors, these wireless sensors, onto public parking spots so that they can tell a data point whether the parking spot is occupied or not. And you can then build an app around that, and as a driver, you can use that app to see how many free parking spaces are available in any given part of the town. And that is really, really fundamental, because a lot of traffic in cities is so-called parking space searching traffic. So just by making it easier for people to find a spot, you reduce congestion, you can reduce vehicle-related carbon emissions, and also energy consumptions. So it's not always about the big stuff, it's also about the small little bits to make systems more efficient. This one was something that I found quite scary when I heard about it. I was at a conference around retail, and someone from Telefonica was presenting, and they were presenting this product, and it's called Smart Steps, and it basically uses all of the data from Telefonica. So this is Telefonica is the owner of O2, so probably quite a few of you will have smartphones with them. It just uses the data they have about the people that use their network and can give then readings about how many people are in a given space at a certain time. So the amount of people, their gender, their age groups, where they have come from, and retailers can obviously use that data to tailor the services or to get a better understanding of where it might be worth to put a new retail center or whatever. But this is how data is now being used around people to deliver new services, and also to, you know, make it easier to make sense of data and to commercialize it as well. And what all of this is pointing to for me is this emergence of a real-time planet, where almost everything around us and at every scale is available in real time. And a nice example of how we're moving to this, really at all scales, is this set of satellites. They're called Doves, which are being shot into space by a company called Planet Labs. They're a startup in the United States, and they want to basically put into space about 180 or something of them. They're about this big, about this thick and this long, and they want to create a mesh network of these satellites that covers the entire planet so that they can take a fresh image of the planet at the touch of a button. So they'll have this network. Whenever you want a fresh image of the entire planet, you click a button and you've got it. So a new image of the planet every day. If you look at Google Earth at the moment, some of the images are up to 3 years old. So it's a huge game changer around satellite imaging and satellite technology and how we can understand the city, for example, measuring how many people are in the city, how parking spots are used, how cars move around. All kinds of insights can then emerge from that. A lot of our thinking is also about city resilience, so about the climate-related impacts that climate change and other things have on urban resilience and how our systems work, whether it's the transport system or the education system or the health system. So we have to develop new ways to ensure that these new future climate realities are integrated into the design decisions that we're doing now. Arap has developed quite an interesting tool. It uses IPCC data, and it can project future climate realities or future climate ranges. So for example, we know that at the moment the average temperature in London is X, and by analyzing this data you can go onto there and say, I want to know what the average temperature will be in Regent Street in 20, 30, 40, 50 years time, and it gives you a reading, and you can then understand how big the difference will be between the climate today and the climate in the future. And for us that's really, really interesting, because we can then make sure that, for example, in a really practical level, that the heating and cooling systems that we put into buildings are the right ones, that they can deal with the right temperature ranges, that they can deal with the new extremes that might be impacting things in the future. So really, really integrating these type of insights into design so that we're much more future-proof. On a public realm level, this is Hamburg's Hafen City. It's on the Elbe River. It's all designed with future climate risk in mind. So the entire new city quarter is really, really prone to flooding. So you can see here that the landscape already has been designed in a way so when the water recedes, it will return back to this state very, very quickly. There's hardly anything here which is prone to being damaged by floods. There's no residential properties on the ground floor, so the people living there don't get impacted. They have walkways that they can pull out so that they can still walk around when the flooding is happening. And being German, all of the parking garages are completely sealed so that the precious cars don't get damaged. So there you go. So very much thinking about future climate realities, future climate risks again, and integrating that into design. There's many, many other examples of cities doing that. Chicago is choosing certain tree species that the city knows will be thriving in different climates in the future. So it's all about long-term thinking and all about integrating long-term thinking into design and policy decisions. A lot that's also impacting our sector, and I think which is also fundamental for how cities work, is this idea of new forms of value creation, new forms of innovation. This is an image of Tech Shop in the US. Who's heard of Tech Shop? Most people have heard of Tech Shop, okay. Tech Shop is kind of like a gym membership for any machine or anything that you can build something with or make something with. So rather than going to the gym and paying £90 or £70 a month to access some weight machines, you can go in there and you can access a 3D printer, or you can sit in the class around electronics, or you can understand how to use design software. So you can go in there with no knowledge of design at all, and you can build your own motorbike or build your own jetpack or whatever. And these are all examples of things that have actually happened. So design and access to tools is completely changing. Another thing that is fundamental to us is this rise of platform capitalism, the Uber, the Airbnb, and so forth. And this is something that we as a business are very, very worried about at the moment. You know, what will be the Uber or the Airbnb of structural design, for example? Will that mean that a quarter of our workforce is going to be out of a job in the future because we can access structural services through these platforms rather than through having staff in our company? So again, it's something that we very, very much think about. And it's also something that is really, really transforming how services are being delivered in cities, because suddenly it's not hotels that provide space for people to sleep, it's individuals. And it's all about excess capacity. In the case of Uber, it's cars that are not being used, that are suddenly being used for providing taxi services. And in the case of Airbnb, it's free beds or free sofas or whatever being used to offer people a place to sleep. And it's really, really disruptive to all kinds of industries. How cities are constructed is also changing. This is a canal house in the Netherlands, a concept for a canal house in the Netherlands. It's developed by a small architecture firm together with Henkel, a materials company in Germany, and they want to 3D print this house. So trying to figure out a way how to efficiently 3D print a house, which again is really, really disruptive if you think about how backward many parts of the buildings industry are. And this is the printer. It's an upside-down shipping container. You can put it on the back of a lorry. You can just set it up wherever you are. You've got the printing unit in the bottom and the control unit at the top, and you can print pieces that are, I think, about 2 meters wide and 3 meters high, and you just put them together like Lego, and you've got your house. That's the long-term vision anyway. Buildings are also changing, which is something that's really, really interesting for us. I think we're moving away from this paradigm of buildings being consumers of stuff, so consuming energy, consuming water, consuming electricity, producing waste, to buildings that actually positively contribute to the production of stuff in cities. This is a prototype by ARUP in Berlin. It's a bioreactor facade element. So these facade strips here, they've got water in them and green algae, and you pump CO2 into them through a system, and the green algae grows through the sunlight, and the CO2 multiplies. You then got a processing facility in the bottom of the building that makes sure that the whole thing circulates, and you can then pull out the green algae as you produce more and more to make sure that it doesn't overflow the system. And you can use the green algae to produce biogas or to sell to the cosmetics industry because it contains lipids that are really useful and valuable for lipsticks and stuff like that. So suddenly you have a building that produces stuff and not just consumes stuff, and also consumes CO2 in this case. Another thing that I personally find really interesting is the importance of history and local context when it comes to what is possible in a city. And who knows which city this is? Anyone? Someone usually gets it. So it is Berlin, and it was taken by a Canadian astronaut out of the ISS. And you can tell that it's Berlin because the lighting technology used in the old east of the city is different than the old west. So you can see the slight difference in color of the lighting technology because they use this sulfur-based old lighting technology, and the west also already has the fluorescence. So even today, through the existing history and infrastructure and so forth, you can see, what the city used to be like simply by looking at what the infrastructure is today. And it's a great, great pointer towards, why context is so important if we think about how cities should change and evolve in the future. And finally, a really interesting urban vision being developed by Hamburg. I'm not quite sure how serious they are about this, but it's certainly something they're talking about. And this is the plan for the so-called Grünes Netz, the green network, where they want to become a car-free city in the coming decades. So Hamburg is a major city in Germany, and they want to become car-free, or as much car-free as they can. And part of that strategy is making a network of green spaces and connecting the existing green spaces that they have in the city to make it much more easier and also more attractive for people to cycle and walk across the city. And all of the arrows you're seeing here is then where they're imagining green spaces extending and moving into the city and weaving together and so forth. So we're now seeing this emergence of city visions that are A, grounded in real policy decisions, and B, very, very different to the car-based, car-centered design cities that we've been used to in the past. So the question that we as a company then always ask ourselves when we do project is, what is normal? That's the kind of looking at the case studies, trying to understand what actually the benchmark of normal is, because it's often very different to what you expect. What will normal be? What are the key trends driving change, and how will that impact us in the future? And the key question for us is, what do we want normal to be? Because we're all part of this decision-making process and this implementation process that will be the future. So that's the core question that we have to ask ourselves. Okay. And that's me. Thank you.
Thank you very much.